Live.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our June 29th special meeting of the Ohio Unified School District Board of Education. I invite you all to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome to everyone. I'm sure we're all looking for summer vacation, and yet we instead have more meetings than ever. So thank you all for being here. I don't believe there are any emergency modifications to the agenda. So if there are none, we can move to approve that. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Thane.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jane. And all in favor, we'll take a roll call vote. Jane?
Aye.
Thane?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And Shelley? Aye. That passes unanimously. Which brings us to our public comments.
Received 3 public comments for this meeting. The first is from Liz Ledbetter, who says, as an income.
Before you continue, can we remove the flag so I can see everybody? Is that possible? Or
There we go.
thank you.
If you can make me the co-host, that would be great too. I can share my screen. As an incoming senior at Nordoff, I'm not being informed of how school would be done next year. I've heard multiple rumors saying that attendance will be by last name, which doesn't sound very ideal, logical to me. I know that my friends' last names are earlier in the alphabet, so I'd be left out. They're still my friends, so I'm going to see them no matter what. So the whole separation thing would be pointless if everyone still sees each other outside of school. I'd rather not lose touch with my current friends. Homeschooling would probably be a better option for me in this situation. With the whole last name thing, we could be spreading the virus to the new people I go to school with and the people I hang out with, so that go a different day. I think that a better system would be the upperclassmen and lowerclassmen division. I know that many people in my grade will agree with me on this. If not, can we request at least 1 or 2 people to have on the same day? And I would say Liz sent this comment before last Friday when we sent out our message to parents about how we would be scheduling, and then also have a form now that you can request to be on a different schedule than the one that would be assigned to you. So hopefully, and then we'll be having a student town hall meeting sometime next week in which students are invited to call in and chat with Mr. Munson and myself about scheduling for next year. The next 2 comments are both from Steve Weed. And they're specific to item 3.1, but it's coming up next, so I'll read this. The first time I approached TOPA 10 years ago, I saw a sign indicating it was a distinguished school. I audibly groaned just seconds before when I saw the rusted gutters. Measure J has made a difference. Nonetheless, I agree that there remains a need. I disagree with the scope of the bond, and I hope that the administration can manage yet another project in the midst of the current challenges facing OUSD. And then second comment, full disclosure, my family lives outside of the OUSD boundary, so any tax assessment would not affect us. I would support a small measure that would bolster OUSD's capacity to fully realize distance learning. I realize not all costs could be included in a bond, but distance learning will increase regardless of quarantine requirements. If there's a way to word the measure so that money for infrastructure could be spread over 10 years, that would help to keep the technology relevant. That concludes our public comments.
Thank you. That works us right into 3.1, which is the discussion of the potential bond. I don't know that we have a presentation on that.
We don't. We have the proposal that John and I worked on, the resolution, which has numbers in it that John and I put in as our best guess, but also placeholders for you to discuss. And so if you have questions specifically around any of the numbers, why we chose those, or would like to change them, we are available for that discussion. And then also thank you to Adam and Alan and David for turning around the project list, which we had been working on and keeping up, but took some work to pull that together. So we're available for any of those questions.
I'm sorry, I didn't notice there was a project list. Is that on the portal or?
The project list is included at the end of the, I'm double checking here to make sure. There is. The project list is it's included in the resolution. So it says bond project list. It's on page 10 of 15.
Under Exhibit A.
Yes.
And if I may, Tiffany, I'm happy to provide just a quick overview of the resolution and just kind of the key elements of it. So this resolution really has three different components to it. There's the resolution itself that provides the legal authority and the legal direction for the district to call an election to be held on the November 2020 ballot. It directs the registrar of voters to conduct this election on your behalf. It also establishes some of the parameters by which a bond would be governed. Specifically, that this particular bond is being played under the rules of Prop 39, which is what the district did under Measure J. Prop 39 rules essentially establish that you go on a regularly scheduled election date. That's why it's this November or wait till 2022. It establishes a tax rate cap of $60. Now we've got a tax rate that's significantly lower. I think an acknowledgement of what's been going on right now with just everything, coronavirus, et cetera. It also requires a detailed project list, independent financial and performance audits. And essentially those are kind of the key, parameters, if you will, that we're conducting this election. So that's the resolution itself. When it gets submitted to the county, or if it gets submitted to the county, it gets submitted to the county, and then they also have these exhibits or these appendices that go with it. I should add one more requirement under Prop 39 is that you have 2/3 of the sitting board. And for you guys, that simply means 4 affirmative votes or 4 yes votes. It's not how many people are in the room or how many people are on the call, but if you have a 5-member board, and currently you do, you need 4 yeses, okay? The 3 appendices that are part of this, the first of which is the detailed project list. These are this section or this component of the resolution is part of the sample ballot. One other, or I should say the last part of Prop 39 is that you provide a detailed project list. Now this is different from when the district went out to voters in the late 1990s, where all you had was a 75-word ballot language. It was it, one little paragraph, here's how I'm going to spend millions of dollars. Prop 39 said, hey, we need to let people know more detail on how we're going to spend those dollars, and thus the requirement of a detailed project list. This Appendix A is printed in the sample ballot. So any voter who wants to know, hey, what am I getting my money? How are we spending this? Will have this by which to evaluate. Now, this is kind of the legal basis. Of course, the district has its, facilities master plan and its existing project list, and they've got dollar amounts and a whole lot more detail. So that's obviously important. But from a legal perspective, it's this detailed project list in Appendix A. You also have what's Appendix B, which is, I would kind of characterize as a legal/political disclosure, and that's the ballot language. And so these are the types of things, this is what the voter will see if they don't look at their sample ballot, and if they simply go and vote and they see, oh, Measure K, and here's 75 words. Do I want to vote yes or do I want to vote no? Key elements of Appendix B are as follows: a summary of the projects, and of course, with 75 words, you just do your best. But we've highlighted what we would consider to be, top priority projects. You also are disclosing the total amount of the bond, the tax rate, the estimated total debt service on an annual basis, and the duration of the bonds. So there's a lot squished into this question, this ballot language that simply says, shall the district, shall it be adopted, this bond for this amount, for these projects, at this tax rate, with this debt service over this period of time. So a lot gets squished into that, but that's the only thing on Appendix B. Again, that's quasi-legal, because if push comes to shove and the oversight committee says, hey, Tiffany, I didn't see anything about Windows or HVAC systems in the 75 words, the district would of course default to and say, well, in Appendix A, the sample ballot, it does disclose HVAC. And that's really what you're beholden to and what you're governed by, okay? And then the last piece, Appendix C, is what's known as the tax rate statement. This too, by approval of this resolution, would be included into the sample ballot for voters to make their decision. And it provides the estimate of the tax rate of what is expected to be in the first year, what is the average tax rate estimate over the life of the program, when the last bonds are sold, and what the total combined debt service is for the entire financing life of the bonds. And then there is, kind of a disclaimer at the bottom that does say, hey, these are only estimates. It's subject to assessed value. Obviously, as a district, we cannot control assessed value. So that tax rate is subject to change. But we generally put together these conservative bond programs so that, and I think this is true of Jay, so that the tax rate is generally below what we estimated to voters, okay? So that's kind of an overview, if you will, of what this resolution entails. Happy to take questions on the resolution. And then of course, the discussion is yay or nay and other considerations. We did, as Tiffany mentioned, spent some time together to discuss what we thought would be an appropriate tax rate and bond program. Again, the district could go up to a maximum of $60 per 100,000 of assessed value. But in this scenario, we essentially said, let's target $39 as an acknowledgement of where we are, certainly in this climate. $39 would generate, quite a bit in proceeds, in this case, $69.7 million. But any change by the board, assuming an approval of this resolution, we would need to change the tax rate and we would need to change the bond amount throughout. So if the district wanted a higher tax rate, we would need to run some numbers and provide those for you. If you wanted a lower tax rate, we could do the same thing. And for context, Measure J, for those of you that were around, this, Measure J, the tax rate was $36 per 100,000. Our survey showed good support for 59, but of course that was pre-coronavirus. So that's the overview, I think, of the resolution.
John, can you remind me if, I know you asked about the tax rate. Did you ask about the total bond amount when you did the survey?
Only in the sample ballot language. So when we asked voters, let me read you the 75-word run-on sentence, complicated paragraph. In there, we did ask that question as part of the 75 words. Now in there, I want to say that the total bond was 85 million, perhaps. So this is a lesser number than that is, of course. But that's the only place that we asked that question. We did not separately ask, hey, what do you think of this dollar amount? How about this bond amount? How about this bond amount? It was just part of that 75 words.
And what approval rate did you get on that question? Do you remember?
Yeah, give me a second. Let me just pull this up real quick.
I'm just concerned because this is double what Measure J was. And
yeah,
I don't want to have sticker shock.
Yeah, it's a good question, but the reality is the sticker shock comes from the tax rate. And I think if you were to just survey anyone on the street and said, hey, how much do you think it costs to renovate all of our schools? I think you would get as low as, you know, a couple of $1 million
Right.
to maybe
No.
100 million.
I know we need the money. It's just, I don't want to not get 35 million because we asked for 70 million.
Yeah. Again, Thane, I would say, and just in my personal experience in doing this 20 plus years, it is rare that the dollar amount of the bond ends up hurting the district. Again, it's more like, okay, can I afford $39 a year per 100,000? Okay, that's good. How much does that get me? Oh, is that a, you know, do they need that much? Who knows, you know? So I've never downsized a bond because of fear of sticker shock on the bond amount. I have on the tax rate, like we did with Measure J, right? The tax rate was, let's bring it down to 36. But I pulled up the survey again. Remind me the question. Oh, what was the support at 82.5 million? We had, and the question simply was, if the election were held today, would you vote yes to approve or no to disapprove? 57% said yes. 3.5% were leaning yes. 29.7% were no, with 1.2% leaning no, and then 5% undecided. So call
And
it
we need
60 to
55,
33 with about 6% undecided.
And we need 55.
And we need 55, correct.
So can you answer this for me, John? So what you're saying, because I too had sticker shock at the 70,000, but you're saying at $36 per 100,000, we were able to do bonds for 35 million, but now for $39, we'll be able to do 67 million?
Correct.
Because of the change in the tax rate?
Your tax base, yeah, your tax base in the last 8 years has seen, you know, really good growth. So the assessed value has gone up pretty significantly. I think you've had back-to-back 5 or 6% years. And so when
And
you
do
get
interest rates impact that?
interest rates to some degree too, Thane, we're going to be conservative on our interest rates. So we're using a discount rate of about 4.25. Believe it or not, I just sold bonds in Mesa last week at 2%. So, you know, we could be leaving a little money on the table, but at the same token, we're in the lowest interest rate environment in history. And I would rather stick with more historical interest rates than be too aggressive. Because if we're too aggressive, the tax rate goes up. If we're too aggressive in our AV assumptions, if we're too aggressive in our interest rate assumptions, the tax rate goes up. But if we're too conservative, the tax rate goes down. Well, that's not a bad, you know, result.
I'm curious from board members if anyone had a chance over the weekend to reach out to other stakeholders and get input or the temperature on this. I will admit that I did a small amount. I had already planned to be out of town for most of the weekend. So I tried, but got a little bit of feedback and it was mixed reviews. So I'm just curious as to what other people found, if anything.
I also talked to a few people. I did, in fact, also talk to Bob Daddy, who does not mind it being known that he would be strongly against. And I did speak to a couple other people that were both negative.
I have to say, I'm surprised, John, to hear you say that people look at the rate, the 3.9 cent per 100, because I looked directly at the 69,000 number. And that's what I thought, boy, if you told me 45, 50, I'd go, yeah, okay. But the 69 kind of hit me as big.
Yeah, it's just, you know, like I say, I think everyone kind of knows what the tax rate means to them. I think less people have a grasp on how much facilities and school improvements cost. You probably have a little bit more of an advantage because you know Measure J, you know how much it costs. You know, you're probably you know, as a board member, just more sensitive to what you're asking and the tax rate. But again, you know, I work with so many districts, and in particular, say a basic aid district, you might have a basic aid district with 2 schools and they'll do a $40 million bond. for 2 schools. And yet the tax rate might be $20. It just happens to be that they have a tremendous amount of assessed value. And so a $20 tax rate for these voters is like, of course, yeah, I can afford $20. And it's like, you realize 40 million for 2 schools, in my opinion, seems outrageous. But again, most people don't have a sense of, you know, what things really do cost or what they should cost. So there may be some folks that might have sticker shock, but again, in my experience, that's why we don't even ask the question on the survey. That's probably the best way to answer it, is because people just don't have context, but they all have context on the tax rate. But that's something you guys can decide on as well. I mean, if there's a consensus that you want to ask for a lesser amount, that will lower the tax rate, and that's an option for you guys, obviously.
And then I didn't see on Appendix B actually that there was a how many years is it 10?
Oh, I think, while bonds are outstanding, yeah, there's not a specific, and I'll tell you why. Just like Measure J, nearly every bond program that we create is going to have estimates, and anything that we put in the 75 words minus the bond amount itself and project specifics, which in this case are quite general, are going to be estimates, approximations, etc. Depending on what happens with assessed values, depending on what happens with interest rates, a bond program like this that has, multiple bond sales similar to J that are spaced 2 or 3 years apart, under the best of circumstances, get consolidated. Mesa School District had a bond program that was in 2018. They were supposed to sell their last bonds in 2024. We sold their last bonds last week. Consolidated because their assessed value growth was good and their interest rate was good. So if we had told voters, hey, it was going to be 35 years and then it's 29, okay, well, that's different. And that you'd say, well, that's not a big, that shouldn't be a big deal because, hey, you're better off. But for districts that passed bonds in the Great Recession, expected to have all of their bonds sold, within 4, 5, 6 years. And I'll take Santa Paula as an example. Santa Paula passed a bond in 2008, and they still haven't sold their last series of bonds. So in 2008, someone would have said 30 years, and now they're looking at 42. So if you put 30 years in here, you're locked to 30 years. So and again, the problem with this little bit of disclosure, and I hope I'm not boring you too much with detail, is that it's really geared more towards special taxes, parcel taxes, sales taxes, other things that are truly fixed. Because you can say a parcel tax of $22 for 4 years, and that is it. It's easy, it's locked in, it's fixed. You can say a sales tax of 1% for 7 years or 8 years. All those things are truly fixed. But legislation was a little clumsy on allowing this to be applied to bonds when we are reliant upon assessed values, which go up and down and up 5% and down 4%. So there's not a real good way to do it other than to give these kind of estimates and these kind of loosey-goosey terminologies, because otherwise you're bound by that level of specificity. So that's why there's not a specific dollar or specific year or term like 30 years.
I'm sorry I changed the subject, Kevin and Shelley. So to say that Bob Daddy is against it, and that's one person in the community, but he happens to own the paper. So if the paper turns against us because we have no other way to have this discussion, Bob Daddy was on the Citizens Oversight Committee and was pleased with the work we had done. And our current members of the Citizens Oversight Committee has actually requested that we move forward on a bond like this. So I don't know how the community finds out that information versus from the paper. And I would hope that they could be fair, but I don't know if that would be the case.
So I've only managed to talk to a couple people, and the folks that I talked to actually they liked the idea, but almost exclusive. They were like, now. because of COVID and the environment, and everybody is just very intimidated by what they think has happened to the economy and where people might be if they see that they're going to have another expense. So when I mentioned that this might mean it's, off the table for up to 2 more years or longer, then people are like, oh well, and it's not quite it's not quite so definitive anymore. So that's a long way of saying I didn't get a lot of help.
I kind of feel the same way, Michael, that if it's off the table for 2 years, then, oh, well, we should ask now because 2 years is a long time. If they say no now, okay, we can ask again in 2 years. But 2 years is a long time to not ask, in my mind.
It is. The other thing I'm hearing is wages, right? And that the bond wouldn't go to wages, and how would we make a difference there? And all I've been able to say is that there was some conversation about technology and other stuff, and I see that in the resolution. But that's a continuing question for me. Is I'm not comfortable doing two things because I think it's splits our focus and stuff. But um, the more we could free up operating money, and I know it's a delicate thing. I think the easier this might be.
I think the solar projects would, once they're in place, would free up operating money. And it occurred to me, I know the moratorium on drilling wells in Ojai is in place, but the thought just occurred to me, does that actually apply to public agencies? And I think it might be worth asking that question.
Right, and a state agency too.
Right.
And is it Ted Moore actually had come to me quite some time ago with some talk around this, and we have not followed up, but I think he has some ideas around this concept. So
Yeah, so that would free up operational money as well, I think.
or
And-
even just turf abatement, or making our fields smaller so that we're not watering giant fields. There's some things we can do around water savings for sure.
Even without wells.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
So what are we talking about with wells? I kind of missed that the first time it went through, and I wasn't exactly sure. We're talking about like selling water or just using it for ourselves and getting off the grid, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I think just getting off the grid was
Okay.
my understanding. I know
Right.
OVS recently did it with their lower campus. I'd be curious to see if they're willing to talk to us about whether that was successful or not.
Well,
Because part of our issue is that we continue to have less availability of water each year. They lower the amount that we can use without overages, but our fields aren't smaller, and we haven't done massive turf abatements, but we pay overages at almost every campus, right, David, at some point. And still our fields, we get complaints about our fields not looking good. So we pay overages, and it's not even enough to make the fields in kind of acceptable shape to the community. And so when people come to us and say, why can't we have grass instead of weeds? We're like, well, we water what we have, and, we're working on that, but there's a lot to do around fields and field management that would make them both better for the community, cost effective, and more water wise.
and so did this district get hit by the Casitas surcharge because of the Ventura lawsuit? I know I did. I was just wondering if the district is subject to that as well, and what that did to our utility bill.
I don't know the answer to that right at this moment.
Okay, right.
I just brought up the wells as part of, how do we free up more operational income? And I think that if we spend the money right, we can probably free up almost as much operational income with the GO bond as we could get with the parcel tax. So
I'm
we
glad
get,
you said that because that's what I
Also-
heard, but I don't trust my math. So Thane, you're saying, I mean, because I was hearing $200,000, $300,000, maybe $400,000 if it was done strategically, and that would be the most that the parcel tax would likely do.
but if we eliminate our power bills, potentially our water bills, we're able to do some things with technology. That can really add up.
Yeah, yeah.
So, John, I'm hoping you can tell me a little more process questions. If we did vote to move forward with this tonight, at what point do we have to pay the county to put this on the ballot? And what would it look like if we chose in July to rescind this? How much are we spending to buy ourselves a month? What does that look like?
To be honest, I don't know. As far as, when do you pay? The answer would be at the conclusion of the election. Election department would send you a bill saying, hey, here's your share. I think we estimated it'd be about $18,000. Again, I'm using Ventura as a template. Ventura's quote based on the number of registered voters compared to you based on your number of registered voters, just simple math puts you in the 17, 18, 19, let's say 20,000. I mean, maybe they have some sort of fixed fee, but if you went strictly size or dollar amount divided by voters, you'd be about 18,000. I've never had a district rescind a resolution. So I can't tell you if they send you a bill. I can't imagine that they would send you a bill because the absolute lion's share of all the money goes to printing sample ballots, printing the ballots themselves, all that information. So if all they're doing is thank you very much, stamping it, saying here's a calendar, submit your ballot arguments, someone's reading to make sure that it's 300 words or less, notifying you of a rebuttal, like that's not a lot of heavy lifting. So, I'm not the elections department, but I would be shocked if they sent you a bill for anything if you came back in, a few weeks and said, I would change their mind.
Can we go back to the 2 year, if we don't do it now, it's 2 years from now, because we have to wait for a governor's election or regular next election.
Mhm.
We're gonna, and Alan, maybe you and David, we're gonna still be working on our current bond in 2 years, right?
We should be nearing the end of a lot of our projects in 2 years.
Right. I mean, I think that available, we're probably about 2/3 of the way through our existing bond. As far as we haven't spent all of that, but we've got projects that have committed, like the library and the kitchen and some things like that. So, yeah, I think 2 years, we're going to be very close to the bottom of that barrel.
Yeah, I agree.
Because
So
we
right
sold
now-
our last series of bonds, which we have, right, John, 3 years to spend, I believe.
That's correct.
And so we sold our last series this year. So we really have to be finished in this year plus 2 more years.
And then in terms of what's on people's property tax bill, there was the 98 measure, is that 99?
97.
And that is over, so they're not paying that anymore?
No, I think there's still a few years left on that. In fact, I texted Kathy. She had asked that very question. And I think the last payment on that, because keep in mind, the 1997 had multiple issuances, right? Kind of like Measure J, they're spaced out. And give me a second here. I think I've got this here. Okay, the 1997 bonds go away in 2032, and the Measure J goes away in 2039.
But even with those on there, we're paying 48.10.
Is that the combined tax rate right now?
Yeah.
That's what I'm reading on the chart that that is
Yeah.
on the resolution.
I took the chart, it's in the summary, and I took the chart, John, from your PowerPoint that you gave to the bond or to the board when we originally considered this back in September, or October. With the
Right.
tax rates of everyone in the county, so.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, so the voters have been getting a pretty significant discount. Again, that's based off of, assessed values that have exceeded projections from 1997. Trying to get out of this blinding light for you guys, sorry. So, yeah, so I guess like I said, those were the years, and then the tax rate again is, I don't recall what the 1998, I could probably look it up, but it's probably maybe $20 less than what was estimated in combined total.
I can show you the chart if you would all like to see the chart that Shelley's referring to.
Shelley, are you saying it'd be 48 plus 39?
Right.
A new tax,
If
yes.
this were to pass, then yes, it'd be 48 plus 39. And the other districts around us are paying 158 and 144 and 120.
This is the chart from John's presentation that shows, essentially it's hard because the elementary and the high school are separate, but you can see, Oak Park's at 150, Fillmore at 137, Simi at 77, Moore Park at 66. We're in these bottom three right here. And Ventura is going for parcel tax, correct?
That is correct.
And not a bond? I thought they were looking at both.
They were looking at both, and then they opted to push on the bond until 2022. Their parcel tax expires this year. And so if they don't renew their parcel tax, they actually lose funding. They have a hole in their budget. And so for them, they just didn't want a chance at putting two on the same ballot. I think in the last meeting we talked about, I said they could put two on the same ballot. The geo bond likely passes, but the parcel tax could fail. And it was just like, it's just not worth it. Let's just go with the absolute basic renewal.
It sounds like they're I'm assuming working on the same logic that would unencumber some of their general fund.
Well, no, in this case, the parcel tax is just straight revenues that they can use for any purpose.
Well, but I mean, going for the bond instead of the parcel tax.
Right.
So they're thinking the bond will be more beneficial than the parcel tax was, which is what.
No, they're going for a parcel tax, not a bond.
Oh, I had it backwards. Sorry.
Yeah. They're going to do a bond. They just didn't want to jeopardize their parcel tax in any way.
Got
And
it.
so they said, let's just give them a single item to vote on. Similar to what you guys have talked about, which is, let's not confuse it, just put one thing forward. In their scenario, an extension of an existing parcel tax that wouldn't increase the tax rate of what people have been paying, they felt was, as easy of a layup as they could get.
If you use a parcel tax for salaries or general operating funds, and then you lose the parcel tax, in addition to the cut in state revenues that you would potentially be experiencing right now, plus the increased expenses, you would have a other significant cut in local taxes, right? Would
Correct. Yeah, for them about $2 million.
And what, as a board, do you all remember? So we started talking on Wednesday about the parcel tax and we went away from it. And I can't even remember now, 6 days later, why we went away from that.
I think part of it is the higher percentage of voter approval that we would need. And it wouldn't, if we could potentially offset as much in the general fund with a bond with a lower needed voter approval, it seemed like the safer bet. That's my memory.
Yeah. And so how do we get that information out, John, that the reason we're doing this versus a parcel tax is for savings that we can use on salaries? Because I think a lot of people feel like they absolutely vote for money for teachers and, over.
And I have to say, part of the feedback that I got was in the project list having, I hate to say this, but the pool has been such a draw in the past, but was actually pointed out as a drawback in this scenario, that if we have that on there, it feels frivolous right now.
Yeah, I mean, to the question about how do you educate, you just try to put forth information via mailers. Depending on circumstances, we certainly walked certain neighborhoods and had flyers. There's other communications, things that the district itself can do from a purely factual standpoint. You can't advocate, you can't say, make sure you support us, vote yes, but you can certainly say, one of the reasons that we're putting forth Measure K is, in addition to our old facilities, we also believe that this would improve the general fund by offsetting expenditures that normally get put towards technology, this, that, and the other, and that could improve and retain teachers and programs and small class sizes or what have you. So it's just the communication. It's crafting that message and using the normal distribution channels to get that word out. Because I do think that's an important message for folks to have here, that it's not just about getting millions of dollars to fix up your schools and make them shiny and new, but there actually is a dual benefit, which is this opportunity to improve your general fund, bringing in more kids, more to ADA, offsetting electrical technology, possibly water, those kinds of things. So it's just the communications, and finding the right people to be those messengers as well, to say, yeah, as a mayor, I'll get behind you on this, or Chamber of Commerce or Teachers Union president, I'll get behind you on this, and I'll be a messenger to convey this to my membership or my constituents.
And I have to say, I emailed all of those people and didn't hear anything back from them. So I'm not sure what to make of silence, or, then my procrastination and not getting to them in time. But yeah.
I do have a question about this, what we're talking about, to impact the general fund. Is there an ability, or is there time even for us to be a little more intentional about that? And a little bit more specific about where we think we're going to recover the funds, and like how much we think we can, as opposed to just a statement that this is something we want to try. I mean, at least as maybe down the road as we start marketing, or right now it's conceptual. I love the concept. The few people that I've talked to, if I was going to turn their head, I'd have to be more specific, I think. So I'm just wondering, can we get there?
Can I shed a little light on that, Michael, for you? We know just by looking at our SCE bill what we could save with solar. And we know that we could save some other money. We've actually saved a fair amount of money with purchases like the tractor, which saved us a lot of power in the grounds and maintenance departments. And we also know that doing things like replacing carpeting, as we're doing this summer in the elementary schools with the LVT that you guys approved at the last meeting, that saves a bunch of hours of custodial time. And so, those all translate in some form into, savings to the general fund.
They do, but then there's a very tricky spot of, we saved general funds by putting people out of work, which is not a
Right. Well, or we have them do other things that benefit the schools in other ways.
But then we're not saving the money though, right?
Right, but the solar part we would.
Right.
And
I
I think
don't
the
disagree.
blinds could help, things we've done in the past. I think we've done things in the past. The question is, what are we going to do in the future? Going to your question, Jane, about why we were moving against parcel tax. one of my concerns is we always lose. And I don't know that there was a more favorable time than the first Obama election to get it through. And we came really close, but we still lost. And I'm not sure that the election environment is ever going to be any better than that. And
Do we think our demographics have changed since then, though?
well, if you think that, if I were going to bet on something, I would bet on the GO bond over the parcel tax, though.
I'm also concerned about a short-term a short-term tax and using that to commit to salaries. Because as soon as we commit to salaries, then if it's only a 4-year or 6-year, and then if it's not extended, what would we do? Right? To me,
Ventura is right now.
right, exactly. And then if you don't have it, I don't know what you would do if it wasn't. So the length of time of the parcel tax concerns me. And using that in our general fund, I think right now we can offset general fund using the GO bond in a way that would allow us to count on that for a longer term than we would be able to with a parcel tax.
I do agree with Jane in terms of, I always look at the big number. And I know, John, I'm sure you're right because you do this all the time, but it still makes me nervous. And I would probably feel more comfortable being under 40.
Thane, bear with me on this exercise. With that number.
No, you're right.
I appreciate that, but I want to just do this illustration. If the tax rate was $1 a month,
yeah,
does it really matter if you get 10 million or 20 or 50? It's $1 a month, right? There's an affordability question there. And unless you're a true expert on what things cost, and no one's even arguing that the district doesn't have these needs, but it's an oversimplification of the issue.
right.
But really people just say, what does this cost me? Yeah, let's fix up our schools. And what does it cost me?
Is
Right.
there a way to reword it then so that the $39 comes before the 67 million?
That's a good question. I've never done it that way. I could dial bond counsel and say, do you care the order? Again, the tax rate in the 75 words, this is all new since 2018. So prior to 2018, it was just projects, bond amount. And now we have all these extra little things. So I don't know if there's an order, but we could certainly ask. Really fundamentally, guys, these things boil down just to the, almost the gut reaction of, do I want to fix up my school? This is a school improvement measure. Do I want to fix up the schools? Do they need it? Do I trust the board to take care of it? And can I afford it? And I think most people, sure, yes, we should fix up our schools unless they don't like you or unless your schools are beautiful and they don't need to be fixed. Montecito is an example of a district that beautiful school, they went for $52 million for one school to renovate it. Wow. And the voters said no. Well, okay, even Montecitoans, if that's what they call them, have their limits. But
They could have just got one person to chip that in.
I know. Oprah, where are you, Oprah? But that's really how these things go. And that's why it really is important to give you that context of, what do the other people think? The mayors, the elected officials, the teachers union, these other people. Because if someone says, it's bad time, that's a good excuse to vote no for a lot of people. Even though I want to support schools, someone gives me the idea it's a bad time and I respect their opinion. That could be a problem, but most people, it's just this ideological, you're either anti-tax or you're pro schools. And then there's the in-between that says, well, let me get out my calculator and see if I really want the numbers to work. But my grandma, she taught special ed for 30 years. I always vote for the taxes. I always vote for schools. I always vote for the kids. That was my grandma. Didn't matter what it was. Didn't matter what the calculus was. My mom, same way. My dad was a little more like, let's see how much it's going to cost me. But most, and then there's the other side of the spectrum, which is I vote no for all bonds. I'm sure you hear that. So you really have the ideologicals. And in your scenario, you have enough in the middle that want to do the math that we probably want something convincing that they feel like this is very affordable. I like the fact that it's less than 60 bucks. I don't like the fact that, you know, at least it was raised that a couple of folks have been negative. I don't know if the negativity means I'm going to vote no, but I'm going to be neutral publicly, or if that means actually I would fight it. And I guess that would be a question for you board members. Is the level of negativity one of, I'll probably, you know, oppose you publicly. I think it's that bad of an idea, or it's just, I don't think the time's right. I'm gonna vote no.
I will say with the people that I got negativity from, it was timing, that this is not a good time for it.
Yeah, I
don't
would say
know.
this. I would say the same, and potentially they would publicly oppose it. I mean, I think we have a few things going for us that we didn't last time, right? Everybody was very skeptical that we could handle this responsibly last time because of some prior fiasco. We've demonstrated that we can handle our money responsibly. You know, and there was another thing that was going for us. I forgot. Oh, the fact that interest rates and everything are as low as they're ever going to be, and potentially even construction costs if we're coming off of a COVID standstill. People are they're gonna want business, as opposed to when everybody was doing a bond and construction costs skyrocketed. So, I mean, there might be some positive things to say, but timing is still iffy.
Yeah, and putting
Sure.
local contractors to work.
And there's, I think that point that you made last week about bringing in revenue by having a bond here, bringing in workers at a time when we critically need it, is a positive. You know, I hear the negative to it, but I think there's also the positive side that it does impact our economy.
I think there's also, I've been thinking about what you said about the pool, Shelley, and we might want to reword the particular line about the pool. But if we don't have a bond, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alan and David, but I don't think we will have a pool and a water polo program in 5 years, right? That's my understanding is, you know, our pool is not CIF regulation, so that's a problem. And the pool, our fixes are not long-term fixes to the pool. They're Band-Aids to the pool.
That's correct. And Band-Aids without any real idea of how long they'll last. And I don't mean to, you know, fearmonger, but we just don't know. We seriously could have a month left on our pool or 2 years.
I mean, you got the county to let us open it by basically begging, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
literally begging. Yes.
And not that we promised them that we were working on it and that we were developing a plan for the decking and the equipment, the pool, the pumping equipment and the filters and the chlorination and acid controls and all of that. So, and they've seen us, you know, we are doing those things. We're not lying to them, but,
Right.
It's been a bit of a slow go.
And the amount of money that we have from Measure J for the pool is not enough to do the work to the pool. Like, for example, building a deep end so that we are regulation CIF for water polo, right? Like we can probably fix some of those things that we need to. The pool will still not be the pool that we need for athletics.
Oh, as I understood it, the money that we had was just enough not to get it closed, not to
Correct.
fix it.
Yes.
Well, we did,
that's
yeah, we
correct.
did take a vote this spring or recently, you know, last 8 months. I know, I remember voting against it, but it was putting that money, but it was to fix those problems, right, Alan? Those.
That's correct. And we
Those
have
are
a contract
patches.
with Aquaflow that we're working with on the equipment and we have bids on the decking and things like that.
But just as a note around that, our fixes are not permanent, and at some point the pool will not be, we will not have a pool.
And CIF basically is really sick of dealing with us, it sounds like, and while we may be able to have swim, they have said that they don't want us to have games in our pool any longer, is what I remember hearing at that meeting from months ago.
Yeah,
So,
that's correct. Yeah, especially for water polo.
yeah.
So that's the reason that the pool is in there, even though it may feel frivolous, it is actually intended to preserve a program at our campus that is popular and, you know.
I get that. And let me say that the people who I have talked to who would be in support of the measure are school affiliated or school adjacent. But those who are not don't know that about the pool. And so to them, it looks frivolous. I don't mean, that I think it's a frivolous thing. I see how it impacts us, but I think it tells me that where we would have the most need for persuasion would be with obviously people who, aren't affiliated with the school and don't know anybody who really is.
We got to get Thane and the water polo team and swimmers out there selling it.
You know, it is mentioned that it might be a community asset as well, right? And that's part of, I guess, the marketing as to, is there anything else that kind of has a general community benefit? An aquatic center, it's not going to matter if you got kids or not, if it's also a community resource. Is there other stuff that we could highlight that way?
Yep. So there's a performing arts center, right? We are in need at the high school of a place in which students can perform that's not the cafeteria or that has seating and those kinds of things. So I'm not sure exactly what that would look like, but there has been a drive for some time for performing arts center that could be utilized, which is the other part of the other reason for a higher amount, right? If we're thinking that we could do a pool and performing arts center and the brick and mortar, and I don't mean a giant fancy performing arts center, but someplace that our groups at Nordhoff could utilize that's not the cafeteria, then those are kind of crown jewel, big ticket items that are not inexpensive. So looking at kind of the overall need and what we might be able to do and build as simultaneous community assets.
I know it's not at Nordhoff, but we do have Matilaha.
We do.
But the pool, I don't know of any other public swimming facility in the valley. And so the entire community loses that facility if we're not able to rebuild.
But really, has community had access to it for the last several years? I don't think so. We haven't opened it during the summer. The rec center was using Villanova.
Because it's broken.
Right. No, I know. It's not, my point is that it wouldn't be a loss to the community right now because they don't have it right now. It would be a gain.
And there are a lot of issues with the Matilaha Theater, but I mean, you're right. A performing arts center could, when you say those words, I think $30 million. So, or 10 million or something. But if you
and I think that my feeling is that would be a hard sell. That would be seen, I would love to have that for our programs, but I fear that would be seen as right now in COVID economic crisis as more than we can do as a valley. I don't know.
Yeah, center is probably, I think maybe facility for both the pool and the performing arts is a more, center implies a large compound facility, right? Somewhat similar to maybe like the current theater, but a little bit bigger so that we could have dance there and we could have band performances there. And
right.
The reason that it's quite difficult to have those at Matilaha because of the practice schedule and getting kids over there. And, there's a reason that makes that problematic. But most high schools, especially ones with thriving performing arts programs have some place in which kids can really perform for the community with seating, right?
Right, but at that level, it's not a community asset that community, I guess to me, community would be other outside entities wanting to use it.
Well, so we build all of our facilities are open to the community for use, right? Regardless of how big or nice they are. Theoretically, Chaparral, right, has a stage and is open. It's hard because there's no seating and air conditioning and heating, which makes it somewhat limited. But you know, that's a community use facility, even though it's not a crown jewel of any sort at the moment. So
I do know that.
It was great in the 20s.
you know, just a little air conditioning and maybe fixing the smell would make it much more usable. But
I do know that when Bob Daddy was on the COC committee, one of the things that he was really interested in was, you know, restoring that pool or repairing or saving the pool. And I don't know, you know, what his opposition is at the moment to a new bond, but it seems, I know that was like one of his pet things.
I don't want to speak for Bob, but I will say I think his overwhelming sense is just that the timing is just horrible. The combination of the split roll being on the ballot, as well as apparently one of the water agencies is going to be having some kind of a bond on the ballot, as well as, and most importantly, COVID. I mean, just the tenuous financial circumstances of so many people in the community.
John, if the bond passes in November, when would people see this on their taxes? What would be the soonest that you would see that?
Yeah, it depends. So it's a good question. Because what I'm hearing loud and clear is timing. The tax levy begins when you sell bonds. However, there is some flexibility in structure that allows some deferral of, let's say, up to a year, because you could generate what's called capitalized interest. Not to go too deep into bond structures, but that just allows you to get extra money from investors who actually make the first debt service payments to other investors before a tax levy is needed to be levied. So let's just take you through a timing. You could pass your bond now. You could sell bonds, let's just say March of 2021. Under normal circumstances, the tax rate would go on the ballot or go on the bills for 21-22. You could generate enough in capitalized interest to push that off to 22-23. So in some respects, there could be a break of a year or two. If you really wanted to get creative, it's not that creative, but I mean, just for the sake of this discussion, the district could issue what's called a bond anticipation note. Yeah, you're familiar with trans. A lot of districts do tax revenue anticipation note. A note is different from a bond in that it is short-term in its duration. In the case of a bond anticipation note, you have up to 5 years to repay that note. So a district could sell, voters could approve $69 million. You could sell $20 million in a note in March and not increase or have any tax levy for 5 years. And in 23-24, 24-25, then you would sell bonds to pay off the note. So there are ways to defer, you know, if there's people that are saying, you know, we should just wait this out a little bit or give us a year or 2 or 3, you could do that. And you could offer that up as a concession, if you will, to voters that this will not impact their taxes for the next, 1 year, 2 year, 4 or 5 years, depending on what you want to do. Interestingly enough, the note concept, it's going to cost a little bit more than not doing a note, but interest rates are so low, it's almost insignificant, and it would be far outweighed by the construction cost benefit that you would be getting through lower construction costs, and certainly offset by the fact that you could improve your general fund health, get your projects done sooner rather than later, maybe bring in the ADA, some of the things that we've already talked about, without having an impact on voters. A little more complicated, right? When you just say, well, how do you convey that to the voters? I think you just say, by passing this now, we will not increase the taxes for 5 years, the end. And that just becomes the talking point. And anyone who really wants to get into the nitty gritty, we can teach them about bans and how common of a tool that is. But again, for the most part, people are just got voters, right? It's just kind of like, all right, well, I support the schools. And if you're not going to raise my taxes for 5 years, that's the excuse that I need to support you on something like that. So a couple of ways to do it, Tiffany.
If the bond were not to pass, that $18,000 that we would owe, where does that money come from?
The 18,000 comes from the general fund. That's the cost of the elections department in Ventura County, who is going to conduct that election on behalf of the district. The cost of printing sample ballots, printing ballots, counting your votes, et cetera, et cetera. That's what the 18,000 or so goes to.
I think locking in
That
low.
to our current bond, obviously.
I'm sorry?
Can't charge that to our current bond.
Cannot, because the voters from 2014 did not authorize you to spend bond money on a future election.
I think there's a big value to the community in locking in the current low interest rates. And maybe we can't communicate that, but I think everybody benefits in the long run from it.
It's true. I mean, both SOMAS and MESA wrapped up their bond programs, and these are small bond programs, right? $9 million each. And each of those districts, because of extraordinarily low interest rates, saved over $4 million in interest because of the low interest rate this year. I think just here, and I just want to be as black and white as I can possibly be. So I'm going to give you every talking point and every point of view that I can give you here. This is not a good time to be going to voters, politically speaking. All other things, non-political, it's a perfect time. And you're talking lower interest rates, you're talking construction cost escalation, you're talking about the stimulus to the local economy, you're talking about improving your general fund, which helps programs and teachers, et cetera, et cetera. You go down the list, and it's like, wow, if you could snap your fingers and pass a bond in Ojai, now's the perfect time to do it. However, there's this little thing called politics, and it takes a real mature, it's the only word I can think of, mature voter to look past coronavirus and now this is bad timing.
But if we're able to push that impact out by a few years to say, we won't start tapping the taxpayers, so to speak, until there's been an opportunity for the economy to recover, to me, that's pretty compelling.
If we convey that.
We wouldn't even have to do bans to do that, would we, John? Couldn't we just say we want approval now, but we're not going to issue for 3 years?
Yeah, but then you lose the purchasing power of construction cost and locking in low interest rates, because you're assuming 3 years from now we'll have the same super low interest rates.
Right, but the low interest rates would be on the bans, not on the GO bonds. So we'd be swapping out we'd be losing the low interest rates if rates went higher.
That
right?
is true. Yeah, you would be subject to the future interest rates, but you would get the low construction costs now if you were to do a ban. But yeah, you could approve it now and then just do nothing for a couple years, not issue at all. If you were going to do that, though, honestly, I'd just say, well, then just wait till 2022. It's probably more favorable.
But
I think you do it to lock in
2022
low
might
rates.
be worse. We don't know. I mean, I can't predict the future. That's why I think 2 years is long enough for people to, if they didn't like it now, it's long enough for them to get over that, to take a fresh look at it.
Right, just by
But if
having
they're
the,
willing to do, what's that?
Yeah, just by having the fact that it doesn't pass till November, we don't issue the bonds till March. It doesn't go on their taxes till then. So you're talking about a tax bill that's due in December of 2021 at the earliest.
At the earliest, or yeah, you could easily do 2022
Right.
and that wouldn't change your lives
Which
at
a
all.
vote 2 years from now would not get us on the tax roll in 2022. So we could say the begins that tax shows up in 2022. But we can still sell the bonds in 2021.
We just have to be able to convince people of that. That's a lot of explaining to do.
Yeah, it's a lot easier campaign to say vote no because it's a bad time, coronavirus, the economy's in the toilet, than it is for us to express low interest rates, construction cost escalation, saving the general fund. That's why you need a lot of messengers, a lot of like teachers and other prominent community members to say, hey, I've studied this. The district's onto something here. We're going to lock in low rates. We're going to lock in low construction costs. We're not going to make any payments for 3 years. 4 years. I mean, the argument could be made, but it's a much more difficult argument to make because it's more complicated than just simply now is not a good time. Coronavirus is bad.
I'm not so sure that it's that complicated, right? I mean, everything that we've said is it's never going to be less expensive to do what we want to do than it is right now. That's a pretty solid message. And you couple that with, and we're not going to ask you to do anything for 4 years to give the economy time to recover. I mean, the timing is perfect for us. And by this compromise, we try and adjust the timing to make it better for taxpayers as well. To me, that's a pretty powerful combo. We get all of the market benefits now, and the taxpayers get a chance to recover before they ever have to deal with it. I like that.
There's nobody who's more of an advocate of the public schools than I am. But I'll say that, an additional, a couple things. One, we've got a budget of $75,000 for our campaign to support the measure. I don't know where that's going to come from. We all know this town is a town where things get done through drivers. And I have yet to find the driver who wants to be the force behind this movement. And two,
75,000, Kevin?
Yes, that's what I saw.
I think the campaign committee fundraising on page 2 says 25,000. Is that what you're referring to?
Somewhere else there was a reference to 75,000.
Okay, I missed that.
And even if it's 25,000, the less the worse, right? The more we can use, the better chance we have. And then, I think there are a number of people asking lately, what is the school district going to be post-COVID? There's been so many discussions about facilities and which are in play and which aren't and which should be sold. I think that timing is also bad. But I will support, if you guys all are supporting it, I certainly don't want to be a no vote to add to the weight on the negative side. But I have to say I'm very, concerned.
I don't mean to belabor the pool issue, but I think it's a valid argument to say if we don't do this bond now, we really won't have an aquatics program, not just not have water polo, but an aquatics program in 5 years. We won't have money to spend on the pool repairs, actually real pool repairs, not just the patchwork that we've already allocated. And in 5 years, I really don't see the pool being viable for any sports program, from what I'm hearing from those in the know. So I feel like not going forward on this, we're essentially saying we're not supporting the aquatics program here. And
I would make a motion.
Is there another district in the county that doesn't have a high school pool?
Moore Park. Moore Park is constantly working on, they have a committee and they're working to get a pool, and they partner with the gym, and the gym just changed owners. And I think that Moore Park has a similar issue with the ability to run their aquatics program, and a very fired up community to try and make that happen.
And I wonder how many families we would lose from the district by not having an aquatics program.
I
don't-
wonder though, I mean, I know David and Alan, you know, we don't know exactly how long these fixes are, but if we could do a bond in 2022 and start right away on the pool, it's not necessarily a vote today not to have a pool. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the pool, the planning for the pool, how long have we been trying to get the the plan, Alan, right now, the $35,000 that it costs to have the plan for the pool? That's been in progress for months.
Yeah, 2.5 months probably, and we've at least, but we've been talking about, you know, what to do to the pool and how to fix the pool, and what sort of Band-Aids to put on the pool since I came here a year and a half ago.
I would make a motion to move forward at 39 million.
Where did that number come from?
I don't want to get a no vote because of the price, and I just, for our community, I like I've said, I know
You're kind of breaking up, Thane. I think you froze.
John is probably right about everything. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, can you repeat that?
Yeah, just I believe John completely, but I always read the headline, and that 69 sounds like a lot to me for Ojai Valley. I don't want anybody else to think that way. I want to absolutely maximize our chance of getting a yes.
John, can you figure out what that tax rate would be?
Sure.
And I think that would keep us under $100 on the tax rate, right? If we were at 39 million.
Well, what do you mean under 100? You're going to be under 100 with a $39 tax rate. Would be a
Right.
misunderstanding.
No, you're right. See, I told you were right. I just, that's how I
My
feel.
concern with that, Thane, is I wonder, and I don't know how to get this answer, but if we go out and say we'll be able to use that to offset general funds, but we don't have actually enough to do the projects that we need to do in order to offset general funds, so we haven't kept that promise. I don't know where that break point is of how much is enough to.
Well, we've spent 5 years spending 35 million. So if we need to ask for more money in another 5 or 6 years, I think that's okay. But I think it's going to take us time to spend that money anyway. I would vote for a higher number. That would be a motion that I would put out.
How would you feel about 45?
If there's consensus, I'll go with it.
For me, something under 50 feels better, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm thoroughly confused by now.
I'm curious if anybody that you guys have talked to was negative because of the amount of the bond, or if it was the bond it's in general.
No, just my gut feeling and the amount that we've asked for in the past. I think we did a lot of research last time on the amount. Hank went out and did a lot of meetings. He talked about 100 million option, 70 million option, 35 million option. there was a lot of effort that went into that, and the decision came back to do 35.
Yeah.
So I don't think circumstances have changed that much.
I think that there is some benefit to sort of doing it incrementally as we, demonstrate that we're able to do stuff, right? I mean, I still remember the skepticism that was around Measure J because of other stuff, and you people, and we people have now demonstrated that not only do we know how to do it right, we've saved money in the process, right? And so, we're very responsible. And if we can't get it all in one bite, maybe we get a large portion of it in a bite. And again, keep demonstrating that we're responsible enough to do that. But I think my concern still goes back to whatever that number is. It's going to need meaningful general fund relief, or we'll sort of defeated the purpose.
I think either 39 or 45 gives us enough money for solar, the pool, and significant improvements in our campuses. So I know it doesn't fix all of our problems on all of our campuses, but I think it makes a big enough difference that people will see it and notice it and feel that they did something good.
If we could combine that with a deferred hit on the taxpayer, which I think is really important to overcome the why now concerns, I'd be comfortable with 45. I mean, really this 70 is the other piece of the original work list, right? I mean, lest we forget,
Right.
it was $100 million work list. But we went at it at 30 plus and we got it, and we've demonstrated that we know what we're doing. And in fact, in some ways, you guys have been superbly creative in getting us stuff done and saving money. And if we keep demonstrating that, maybe a third bond won't be impossible to get the rest of what we're trimming off of here.
And Balfour Beatty way overpriced on a lot of
Oh,
that,
yeah.
100 million. So
Yeah.
my last question about that in relation to that, Michael, is this doesn't preclude, it doesn't say we're talking about specifically spending this amount on this campus, right? Because I know there was discussion, people were concerned that we weren't spending money at Summit because of the closure up there until now. Now we're spending money on that roof. And there are people who are calling for us to close some campuses, which,
Yeah.
we haven't started talking about, but this doesn't say we're spending it on specific places, correct?
It has a list of the schools. If you look at page or appendix, appendix A, it has a list of the schools, all of them, but it does not have specific school projects.
So
And
we
it
can
also
prioritize
says
it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
it
go ahead.
also says there that we may not spend the money on everything on the list, right?
Yeah, the thing with the resolution is it precludes you from spending money on things that are not on it, but it does not obligate you to spend money on all projects. Obviously, there's contingencies, things come up, priorities change, budgets go too high. So you're never forced to do everything on the list, but if it's not on the list, you cannot do it.
And if we're scaling back from 79 to 45, then we can't spend as much money as we could have otherwise.
But I think
Correct, although
another big talking point against the measure, if we have discussions about closing schools at the same time we're asking for the bond, I would imagine there would be neighborhoods of people who fear their school closing and vote against the district at that
I
point.
agree. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. I'm an individual board member, but I am not in favor of closing a school. I am just hearing people asking us to talk about it. So.
Right, I just hadn't thought about the consequences of that, or, how the perception of that, I guess.
Right. Between
So
that
let's
and
look
sell
at-
chaparral, right? That's the other thing that people are starting to say is, sell the downtown property. So I'm also not ready to consider. I could support the 45 if we have the deferred tax strategy. I think there's something to be said, whether it's rational or not. It's an emotional feeling right now that this is a scary time to make big commitments for people. So that's kind of where I would be. I think that the deferral of the tax impact could maybe make a huge difference.
I agree wholeheartedly that it's a very scary time. My sense is that the nuances like the deferral are going to be lost on most people. And I think a lot of people really encounter these measures when they're in the ballot box. You know, I don't know that a lot of people have the bandwidth or the attention that that we would like them to have. So
Any way to add the deferral language into the language in the resolution?
Into those 75 words?
Oh, I wouldn't put it into the 75 words. I mean, you could put anything in there, right? Like I said before, but what you put in there is like legally binding.
Hey, John.
And granted, I don't see a scenario where you wouldn't be able to defer for 4 years, but.
John, didn't you say that based on your experience, if we were going to defer, that you would just recommend we wait till 2022?
If you were going to pass a bond in November and not sell bonds at all until 2022, then yeah, I would say just wait, guys. But if you wanted to take advantage of low construction costs and help the general fund by getting these projects done now, and bail out this. I mean, if the swimming pool is an intriguing one, because if it's truly like you lose your swimming program, you're almost forced to do a bond right now. I hate to say it. But if you're going to access dollars from that bond authorization now, then of course you should go now and we could defer the payments. But if the intent of you guys is to just not sell bonds and get on the tax roll at all for 2 years, but just pass it now so we got in our back pocket, then yeah, I would definitely wait. But I think the thinking's evolved, or at least my sense is that the goal would be to get dollars today because of those benefits.
I also think how we spend the last money that we have on the previous bond is impacted by whether we have additional revenues coming.
What are you suggesting?
Well, there are things like we don't feel like we have money for the pool right now because we have these other priorities to spend money on. But if we had the follow-up bond coming in, then we could maybe allocate some of the existing money to getting that moving, knowing that we'll have enough for everything. Well, not everything, but knowing that we'll have enough for, you know, everything that we're contemplating over the next few years. I don't know, Alan could answer better to that, but I just think it would give us some breathing room and allow us to be more creative about how we spend the last Measure J money.
Yeah, it absolutely is true, Thane, because we have plans for the cafeteria at Nordoff that we'd like to move forward. We would change the plan for redoing that kitchen and completely. And the solar, you know, moving ahead of the solar and putting all the elementary schools back on the list and some of those kinds of things would be, you know, something we could jump all over with both feet. But we do have some caution in the wind, looking at, you know, what's left and what are we committed to and what's the most important things to spend money on from two standpoints. One standpoint is, you know, how can we save the district money in their operating funds with the dollars that we spend from the bond? And also from, you know, looking down the road at where do we want to spend the money, you know, if you know, allocate it to the school sites that are going to be the, you know, the most likely to need it long term.
Yeah, I just remember, and it probably doesn't apply here, but with the 97 bonds, at the end of that, it just seemed like the school district was spending money willy-nilly because they just had to get rid of this last bit of money. And I know we're not doing that, but it really irritated me.
Well, especially considering that we opened it back up and found all the unfinished DSA.
Exactly, that they
Oh, yeah.
hadn't spent it on.
Yeah.
And so I just feel really strongly about having a long-term plan. And I think that if we don't ask for the bond now, it kind of, well, I'm not saying this about you, I'm just saying it about me, that it makes me feel like I'm not planning for the future. And, you know, if the voters say no, I'm willing to accept that. But I think it's my responsibility to ask.
Alan brought up a good point around planning for the future. So for example, the Nordhoff cafeteria is a really good example. Our current plan is to do some retrofit. Our experience so far in retrofitting things is that it's never costs what we think it will cost, because as soon as we open things up, they're in worse shape than we anticipated. And even if we redo the kitchen at Nordhoff, it really should be like we have done with Matilaha, where we knock it down and start all over again, right? That's what needs to be done in that project. But we don't have the money to do that. So there definitely would be some things that we would potentially, the pool, many of them at Nordhoff, in fact, where we would do something that's better and more long-term if we knew that we had money coming in the future than what our current funds allow us to do.
I'm actually gonna, I struggle with this a lot, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that are listening or will hear about it that will choose one side or the other and quote what we've been saying tonight. But I have to say, without COVID, absolutely, this is a project that, or a bond that needs to be moved forward, that needs to go to the voters, that the district needs. And I, right now been reading a lot about how we need to stop living in total fear. We have to be cautious, using my masks. I don't think bars are a great place to be, right? But I think we are, I'm not going to totally decide on the future of what the district needs based on my fears of today, or, the next 8 months or 18 months to get a vaccine. So I'm going to make a motion to approve putting a bond out for a November vote of 45 million.
And so you would actually be approving, I believe, Jane, this resolution. So the motion would be to
approve the resolution with the modification of the amount to 45 million.
And if I could also suggest, I have 2 updates to the current resolution, just so when you're approving it, it's correct. Reframing the language around the pool. And then also there's just a typo where there's a question mark at the end of those 75 words that would go. So approving this this resolution with the numbers, typos, and rewording the aquatic center.
What she
there is no typo, just for the record.
Sorry, okay.
It is a clunky question. It is, shall it be adopted? So you're actually asking the voters yes or no.
Yeah, got it.
And it's so bad, but it's just, that's the way the legal,
John.
that's the way it is. So you keep the question mark, otherwise we have a problem.
There you go.
I'll second
And
it.
by the way, just, you'd think you'd asked earlier, but just to give you an idea, the tax rate required on that would be about $27.
Right.
So we'd go from 39 down to 27
that feels good.
if you wanted to do the 45 million option.
That feels
And
good.
what
See
about
how
the
much you've
mural?
saved us, John? Look at that.
What's that?
Look how much you've saved the voters already.
Oh, yeah, I didn't save them.
And
So
if you're
motion at this point, and I'm wondering about Michael's desire for the deferred tax.
I think that comes out in how we market it versus being included in the, I mean,
Oh, is that true? I
obviously,
don't know.
I
Would
mean, I
that be
certainly,
part of the resolution.
I don't know, not part of the 75 word, but maybe some part somewhere else.
It'd be nice if, I mean, even if it's a statement of intentionality, it'd be nice to go on record saying this is what we intend, in a way that's not part of the marketing. You know what I mean? Because that's going to sound a little self-serving.
Right. Well, I would have to say, I would need you to talk about it. 4 years seems too long to me.
My concern, I like the concept, Michael, but my concern is that if tax rates go, or not tax rates, if interest rates go up in the next 4 or 5 years, it could hurt the community.
Could we have a statement that says the intention is to defer the tax impact from 2 to 5 years, and we could have a range which would allow us to have a couple of different tools. Either we don't sell or we use a ban, depending on what's best in the current situation. And we could just have maybe John appendix B or somewhere in there, or
Again,
I'd be comfortable with that. I mean, again, it's like, my concern is that, all of the resistance that I'm hearing is not that we don't need the money, and not that we don't need all of the fixing. It's that the taxpayers just are not going to vote for something that's going to hit their pocketbook right now. And so my feeling is if we can sort of assuage the right now fear, and if it's by having a range, that says at least a couple of years out, I'm okay with that. I don't know that we have to be absolutely precise.
And it's going to take a couple years almost.
well, how about if we say not before November 22 or something? So it could be 2 to 5, but it's not before 2022.
That it won't impact their tax bill prior to.
Yeah.
I can work with that.
John?
So just talking out loud here again, you pass it now, you sell in 21. Normally it would go on the 21, 22 tax rolls. You're saying, hey, we're going to give you a holiday at least for the 21, 22. So that in essence is almost 2 years of no taxes, right? Because there's the 2021 taxes that we won't be paying on. There's the 21, 22 taxes that we won't be paying on. The earliest would be the 22, 23 taxes. I mean, you could definitely put that in there, and then to some of the other points, 22, 23, that's something that can just be part of the marketing strategy as well. So we could work some language in there into the detailed project list, because there's all these kind of declarations, etc.
And then I forget what it's called. I forget what it's called, John, but if we were to get a good deal on rates like in the next year, what is it? You can take the funds and invest them in slugs or whatever, and so we're essentially not, no one's paying anything.
The cap,
right?
yeah, capitalized
Yeah.
interest.
Right.
Yeah, so you could sell the bonds in March of 2021, generate enough proceeds to make the payments that are normally due in August 21 and February 22. So your next payments that would be due, and possibly August 22. So then your next payments would be February of 23 and August of 23.
So there are strategies to do it.
So there are strategies to do it. And usually I think you can get up to 18 months, which would cover that period. And again, give you that break so that the soonest that we would levy a tax would be in 2022, 23. So if I'm a voter, I'm saying, you've given me a minimum of a 2-year holiday, and we could communicate it, in a way that it would be minimum 2 years, maximum of 5 years, Because, you know, who knows what November is going to look like? Who knows what October is going to look like? And, you know, and who knows what the beginning of 2021 is going to look like? You know, you guys may say, hey, I'd rather have 5 years of freedom. Things have really gotten bad. Good opportunity to get school facilities built and improved. But boy, this is tough. But again, I think I'm a firm believer that the stimulus plan that local school bonds bring far outweighs any cost of paying, you know, a couple percentage point increase on taxes. But that's my 2 cents.
And it
So
would
yeah,
allow
I
us
think
to
we would
lock
go
in
with the
low
22,
interest
23,
rates. Yeah.
22,
sorry.
23.
Yeah, it would allow us to lock in low interest rates and plan for the future.
Correct.
That's my thought.
Yeah, because even though you
Without
pay a
burdening
little extra for that,
taxpayers.
rates are so low. Okay, so no tax rate increase until at least 22, 23. And I would propose we can put that in the first paragraph. Well, second paragraph under the full text of the bond measure where it says bond authorization. That we can say will be authorized to issue and sell bonds up to 69, up to 45 million. Well, that's going to be a global change we're going to have to make here, with a tax rate that does not begin to be levied until at least 22, 23.
Instead of at least, can we say before?
Yes.
Do not be taxed for. So do I need to restate the motion, or Shelley or
I
Tiffany?
think I think that sounds good. I think you've stated it.
If you don't disagree with anything we've talked about, then
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And I would second it.
All right. It sounds like we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, did you have something to say? Go ahead, John.
I'm not, if it's appropriate for me to say something, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. And this is maybe a little bit geared towards to Kevin and those that got a little bit of the negative feedback. I guess my question would be whether or not folks like the owner of the paper, when explaining this proposal, which is deferring, you know, the payments while enjoying the benefits that we so desperately need from general fund to improve facilities at low interest rates and low construction costs. Is that something that you feel that you might have support? Because I agree it's tough to explain this to the everyday voter, but if we explain it to the right people, their endorsement of this program is going to sway the everyday voter, not a long-winded explanation of how we're deferring taxes because of capitalized interest and this, that, and the other.
I don't know if we're going to know that tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I can just say, you know, I spoke to Mr. Daddy, you know, at some length. He obviously is a person who has no trouble, you know, speaking for himself. I do believe the paper will oppose the measure, and I'll just leave it at that. I don't think that the particulars of this, of the, you know, the nuances that we've carved out, you know, maybe they would have some impact. I really just don't know.
Okay.
So we have a first and a second. And I am assuming there's no further discussion at this time. So we'll take a roll call vote. All in favor, Jane,
Aye.
Thane,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Kevin,
Yes.
and Shelley, aye. That passes unanimously. So we have a lot of work explaining this ahead of us. And I agree with you, Kevin, that we need a champion for this endeavor. And I hope we'll all start talking to people to get that moving.
And then Shelley and Kevin, just a note, given the tight timeline, we'll need this. So John, I assume we'll work on the updated resolution tonight. I sent, or first thing in the morning, I sent you just a revised wording on the pool. And then I would need you to come by and sign this probably first thing in the morning so that we can drive it down to the county tomorrow to meet the deadline.
Let us know, or let me know, and I'll make sure that happens.
We'll be
Yeah,
here.
just let me know.
Well, just come by. I'll be here in the morning, so all day.
And thank you, John. We put you through the paces today.
Oh,
Appreciate it.
no, I appreciate it. This is not an easy thing. I hope your voters see the wisdom. There is wisdom to it. It's going to be a tough sell though, no doubt about it, but we'll see if we're up to the challenge. We're going to give it everything we got.
Thanks so much.
All right, we'll sign off. Thanks, guys.
Hey, John.
Bye.
So 3.2 is approval of this change order for the Nordhoff Library ceiling. And I'm glad Alan's here because I'm guessing there are questions about this. I know I have some.
And I would just say Adam is on vacation. We do occasionally let him go on vacation, and so that's why he's not here tonight.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe I could give a little preamble to this. You know, when the original plans for the library were made, there were all kinds of decisions that were made about all kinds of things. And there was an austerity, circumstance there that people really were trying to keep the cost of things down. And so there were renditions done that I think you've seen recently of what the ceiling could look like if it was as pristine underneath the existing ceiling as they hoped it might be, which it turned out not to be. So when the original plans were submitted saying we could do this with the ceiling, it was never going to look like that. So we discovered that when they demolished the ceiling. So there's been a lot of discussion going on about how to make the ceiling look at least on par with all the other work that's being done inside the library to provide a newly renovated library. And so when we put,
Alec, I'm going to just show the pictures of what it currently
okay.
looks like, just so that you can all see them while you're talking.
Yeah, and I'm kind of confused as to why anyone ever thought it was going to look good under there.
So this is one section of the ceiling. You can see there's multiple boards. The boards aren't level. You can see there's like this extra board here. And then if you look here, you can see there are these cross bars, this gap here, and then just in terms of the overall shape of them.
That's just taking rustic to a whole new level.
So that's
Yeah,
Well, I do want to say something on that because I know a little bit about that whole design process. You know, they had those charrettes where they were gathering input, and that is a thing. I'd actually requested to talk to the architect because I'd love to, for Tyson at least, to talk about it, because I believe it was, it is a thing. I mean, there are buildings, really nice buildings that purposefully and as part of the design have those exposed elements. Maybe there's a different view now among some, but my main understanding is that it just ended up not looking the way it was expected to look when it was uncovered with sistered boards and things that were just not consistent or subject to the kind of design that had originally been put into place.
So we were open to this design, right? We all like the look of this design, but as you can see, this design has kind of like one board, not multiple boards together, no gaps, no crossbars. There's just a lot of things in this design that we don't have in reality. But the design itself is the industrial design with these open sprinkler pipes and the open HVAC is nobody's opposed to that.
Right. I believe that's what they just did at the Topa Topa Brewery. So you're right. That is a very popular, common thing to do right now. But I wonder if there was how you figure out what's up there before you set that in the design. If there's ever a way to get that knowledge ahead of time. I don't know.
Right, so I don't know, but Kevin is right, that is a thing to do sort of an industrialized look, and places like Made West in Ventura and that, and maybe Topa Topa, I haven't been in there, but yeah, that's definitely a thing. It's just that this was, as Michael, I think, said, takes rustic to a whole new level. And not only that, there are little chingers and shavings and splinters and thousands of staples and all kinds of things in those boards that would make cleaning them up, really excessive. So, as I said, the next thing I wanted to say was that I did receive a lot of questions and feedback from Tiffany on questions that have been posed about this. And I want to say this, almost all those questions have already been answered. They're great questions. We've already asked those questions in the discussions, the many discussions that we had about what should be done to improve the look of this. So I'm happy to address any of those. I think I probably have them all on the tip of my tongue.
So I'll go straight to my question. So if we're not doing what we were going to do, is there any savings? Is there anything we're not spending? Like, oh, we were gonna paint it and that was gonna cost $5,000, right? And that's been taken into account. So this 106,000 is above and beyond that.
That's correct. And of course, you and I walked that and looked at it, so you've got a firsthand impression of what it looks like. But
So how much is just putting drywall on the roof, on the ceiling?
one of the options was to put drywall on there, and you would still need to put some furring in, not as much, but you don't have the furring in place to attach the drywall, every 16 inches. The furring for the tectum is every 12 inches, and that we did check with structural. Structural said drywall was okay for the weight, but and we've also checked with them with structural on the weight for the furring and the hat channels that are anticipated for the proposal that you're looking at now. So,
and let me pause and say also, Jane, we talked about the drywall. Part of the problem with the drywall is the fire sprinklers. And so it require essentially an overhaul of the fire sprinklers and potentially another layer to go around. So the drywall, we could do that. I don't know that it's a cost savings given what we would have to do with the fire sprinklers to make that work.
Right, thank you.
There's fire sprinklers right now that are not
Well,
being.
The difference is, Jane, that if you enclose that upper chamber, so you've got an 18-inch gap between the ceiling and the roof, now you have to provide sprinklers in that zone as well, as opposed to one layer of sprinklers for just, what we're proposing. It creates a new zone.
That makes sense.
It does. Doesn't to me. I don't have. It's like I'm thinking about everything. It's like we don't have sprinklers in the attics.
You have a zone that's the 18 inches of the rafter, and between the drywall and the roof would be this 18-inch zone that you would have to provide fire protection for, based on the 2016 building codes.
Even if it's the right size, thickness of drywall.
Yeah.
Doesn't it have something to do with thickness?
Yeah, that was one of the, and we also, well, so weight wise, we're okay. We would need to go back with the CCD to DSA to do that as well. And the fire sprinkler thing would get revised. And it lowers the look of the ceiling across the whole thing, making the room appear smaller. So that was one of the goals, and what we ended up with in a proposal was that zone in the middle that is open to the rafters. It's, painted a black color or a dark gray that makes everything sort of disappear. That might be ugly anyway.
So what is there a picture of what this with this $106,000, what it would look like?
Yes, you should have seen the option 4 diagram that shows not only from a diagrammatic
That's where it's exposed in the middle.
Yeah, so there's a rendering. It's hard to, but this, right? Can you see this option?
Yeah. But how does that, it's still exposing the middle.
Yes.
Correct. And
so isn't there a sprinkler system that has to go in all that other area that you're covering up?
That the tectum doesn't require, because it's kind of porous. It doesn't require that we put sprinklers above.
So you're furring out for the tectum just in the red areas?
You're furring out for the tectum in the center where it's kind of gray. And then you're putting in a hat channel in all those pink areas. And we would have drywall in the areas that are sort of a bluish color. And so we're okay in those zones.
And it costs $40,000 to fur out just that gray zone in the middle. Is that what I'm
So
seeing?
basically, the proposal that you're looking at is a combination of 4 different aspects of change order. The least expensive is a new skylight, which is $850. The furring and the fire protection, and then there's also some additional time involved, both from the standpoint of the additional time to do this work, as well as some time that was lost on CCDs, waiting on DSA for answers. So all of that rolled in together is what gets you to the 106,000. And the other thing that this does allow us to do from an aesthetic standpoint is to hide a lot of the conduits, water pipes, sprinkler pipes, things like that, that will be underneath the hat channel between the rafters and the tectum. That'll be separated by this 1.5 inch hat channel that's in those pink areas.
You know what's scary, Alan, is thanks to you, I spent a little time understanding what hat channels and furring and everything and tectum. I actually know what you're talking about. It's scary.
Yeah, it does get kind of technical with you. Thanks for that, Kevin. If you, Tiffany, can you roll your screen down just a little bit to see the pictures? There you go.
What is the cost of the sprinkler system, Alan?
It's just like 21,000, I think.
Mhm.
And the furring would have been 44, somewhere around there.
Yeah, 41-ish, almost 42.
And so I still haven't figured out how we got to 106. Where did that other 40,000? We have 20,000 on sprinklers, 40,000 on furring, and then
The furring, that's the furring that would have been done, right? It's not this.
Right. So if, I guess to explain it this way, if we did nothing, if we walked away from this and said, nope, we're just going to stick with the original plan, we still need the $42,000 in furring, and we still need the $21,000 in fire sprinklers because of design issues that were not, that were either discovered or were, not in place to begin with. So, so that's,
And why is that our problem and not the
architect.
The problem for the furring is the means and methods discussion. And so you'd have this finger pointing between the designer and the builder saying, well, you should have done it this way. And then the designer saying you should have done it this way. And the contractor saying, I couldn't do it that way because you required me to do these things on the roof first. So you'd end up with a real finger pointing contest in that battle. The fire sprinklers are a little bit of a combination of because of this redesign, we're able to hide the sprinklers instead of having them exposed, and a design thing that required some changes to about $11,000 worth of changes to the sprinklers anyway, just because the design we had didn't work.
I'm sorry to keep harping on it, but this 106 for a ceiling is just beyond what I can comprehend. So if we leave the ceiling like it is and we add an additional layer of sprinklers and drywall, that sounds like $65,000 with painting.
You're going to do about 60,000, 63,000 to finish the project, without doing anything new to the drywall.
So it would likely, Jane, be the same as this, if not more, because we would still have to do the addition. So essentially, we would be asking you right now to do $60,000 just to fix the design errors. So the question is, do you want $40,000 to cover up the the beams essentially in a way that works, or we could go back to the drawing board and say, how much would it be to add drywall and the sprinkler systems that are required there?
Also, one of the drivers of this for Adam and I,
I'm sorry, Alan, before you go on, it seems to me that if you adding drywall, you don't need the furring out, you don't need the 41,000.
you do because you only have rafters in one direction to attach the drywall to, and you need to have a support for the drywall every 16 inches to screw it into. So both directions, right? Not just one. So, but one of the drivers for this was that we realized that to do the furring out in order to attach the tectum to the ceiling as originally planned at the roof point, we were going to spend $41,000, almost $42,000, and get no benefit aesthetically from it at all. And so we started looking at these other options, and then the fire sprinkler thing came in as part of the change orders that are sort of typical to a job like this. And so then we realized, okay, maybe we should bite the bullet and spend a little bit more, but get something that is aesthetically pleasing and matches everything else we're doing in the library to make it look beautiful and new.
Because the total library is $2.7 million project, right?
Right.
Somewhere around there. So this is essentially $40,000 to.
And maybe, maybe to Jane's question, when we bid this the first time in May of 2019, take the quad out of the equation, and it came back $631,000 more than the bid that we got in October, because we did some value engineering in the foundations and at the fencing at the roof line and some other things.
You actually mean less. So it was $630,000 less.
Did I say more?
So we've already saved $600,000 by bidding it a second time.
Correct. Yeah, thank you for helping me restate that.
It sounds like you've looked at this every angle to try and figure out a solution here.
I believe I have.
And we've spent a lot of time working with the architect on what's possible. This is the cost-effective option that doesn't leave those beams looking, looking like this. But, and as Alan was saying, you can, well, I don't know if I can make you see it. You can see how like they're not in good shape.
And one other thing that I think was a driver was that we went through the walkthrough on the opening of the locker rooms at Matilaha, and everybody was oohing and awing until they looked up and saw the skylights.
Yes, I have to confess, I was certainly prominent among them.
Which we ended up redoing, right?
Yes.
Because they weren't on the original, and they kind of ruined the look of all the beauty that we had done because we hadn't finished the top.
Right.
And I would just say, this is not designing for joy. This is just designing so the project looks finished. There's nothing joyful about the ceiling. It's not beautiful or extravagant. It's just not completely unfinished, as if we opened up the rafters and said, okay, the library's done.
Well, I have to say, I think it still retains some of the, interesting elements. And I think it's nice that we have that area that it's going to be a high ceiling, because I think, those kinds of environments can feel a little oppressive if it's just a singular low ceiling. So, I'm pleased with the design.
Are there other questions or?
Well, I just want to agree. I don't think we're finishing up with a bad design or a bad choice. I think it's going to look nice, and my only other comment on this, I don't think it was realistic to expect what was expected. So I think this is the most realistic possibility, we could have hoped for anyway. So
I would agree. I think we've all known that as these buildings open up, we've found surprises multiple times. So there's no reason why the, library should have been an exception. But yeah, I like, I like the alternative. I think it's nice. I think it works. So.
And I think we should take that into the future with our future jobs. As we know, every single wall or ceiling that we have opened up has had more in there, and we need to understand that that's the reality here.
I mean, even at Summit with the roof, there was an allowance for the consideration that when we opened it up, it would be bad. And it was still worse than our allowance, right?
Right.
Like, we planned for it to be bad and it's worse than bad. So.
Right. Is there a motion to approve this change order?
I'll move to approve it.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Michael?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Oh, sorry, I said Jane. Vane, aye.
Oh,
That's all right. Jane,
sorry.
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
and Shelley, aye. That passes unanimously, and thank you for your work on that. You know that
Thank you all very much.
we're all looking forward to the finished project there. It'll be great to have as we start the new school year. Something to look forward to this school year with everything else being what it is.
Yeah, and this definitely will help us kickstart a few things.
A good place for us all to get together.
Yes. So that brings us to 4.1, future agenda items, if there are any. If not, then we will adjourn for the evening. All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for offering up another Monday night.
Thank you.
Night, everybody.
Good night.